Friday afternoon, but thank you everybody for bearing with us for the full course of the day, and thank you for joining us for this plenary panel. So we have the privilege of being joined by the CEOs of the state's 4 utilities, both electric and gas. This is the second time we've had a conversation like this. The last time was about a year and a half ago, and it's something that I hope we can continue to do, because I was asked this morning about the contrast between my comments and the keynote's comments. I'm a firm believer that the electric utilities in particular are going to be absolutely essential in the process of decarbonizing, and I have learned over the course of the past 3 years that our gas utilities are just as committed to that challenge as well, though with perhaps a slightly different perspective. And so my question is always, how do we work in collaboration with our utilities in order to move towards those goals? So that, I hope, is what we are going to talk about today. And without further ado, I'd like to really just jump right in. The hope for this conversation is that it'll be a bit of a dialogue, a back and forth between everybody up on the stage. We will have some time for audience Q&A toward the end, but I think it's just an opportunity to get a sense from the people who are the deciders how they see this shared project. So what I'd like to start with is ask each of you we'll sort of go down the line here. Introduce yourselves. I'm not a big fan personally of panels where I read a canned bio of everybody. I think it comes better coming from your own mouth. And talk about your company, and generally speaking, how you all are approaching this, as I said, the challenges and opportunities of moving towards a system with less emissions. So, sir.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Vince Gato. I've been with Liberty Utilities for 2 years. I'm the president of the East Utilities within Liberty. I started my career in Chicago, where I worked at Wisconsin Energy Corporation for 17 years. After a horrific pipeline explosion in California, I relocated my family, where I worked for PG&E for 10 years prior to joining Liberty. My family and I relocated to New England about a year ago. So I oversee 7 utilities in the East region for Liberty, 5 gas, 1 electric, and 1 water. Liberty Utilities is part of Algonquin Power. We've got 15 utilities across all of North America, water, gas, and electric. When I look forward at some of the challenges that maybe we're seeing in the upcoming 5-10 years here, specifically in New Hampshire, I think about affordability for the customer. Our customer growth rates in New Hampshire are not as strong as some of the other utilities that I have. And as a result, keeping the infrastructure up to date, some of the cybersecurity investments, some of the challenges that we're seeing and what the customers want are going to really pose a lot of challenge for us to do it in an affordable way. But looking forward to today's panel.
Good afternoon. My name is Bob Coates. I'm the new president of Eversource New Hampshire. I've been with Eversource for 37 years. I don't know how that happened, but suddenly one day it was 37 years. But I've worked in many, many different operations roles, safety and health roles. I'm really proud to be here today. As you know, Eversource have about 550,000 customers in New Hampshire. We own a lot of the transmission and distribution assets in the state, and very, very focused, similar to Vince, on the affordability. Affordability is as important as reliability in today's world. But we're also seeing significant challenges with the environment. The impact on the system, the severe weather that we're seeing, that we've had, the last 3 years of 100-year storms in the last 3 years, the impacts there. And then also taking this system that we built, decades and decades ago as a one-way export system to now being a two-way import-export system, and how to balance that in a sustainable, cost-effective, and reliable fashion. That's our focus at Eversource, and we're really proud to be able to serve the state.
Good afternoon. I am Alyssa Clemson-Roberts. I'm the CEO of New Hampshire Electric Cooperative. I think the last time I was here, I hadn't even been in the state a year. It's a little over 2 years now, so thanks for having me back. I've spent most of my adult life in some type of service, either working for public utilities or other rural electric cooperatives. It's something I feel very passionate about. I'm excited to be in New Hampshire. NHEC is a member-owned cooperative. We are a not-for-profit utility, so our ratepayers are also our owners. We serve about 87,000 meters throughout the state of New Hampshire. We're in quite a few counties and towns, and sometimes we're in half of a town with the folks up here on the panel. I would tell you, I think some of our biggest focus over the last couple years has been on reliability for sure. It's our members' #1 concern, and affordability, and balancing those needs of the future grid and what we need in terms of resiliency and reliability for service today. And it's a balancing act. It's everything we do every single day. So thanks again for having me here. Looking forward to the discussion.
Great. I'm Tom Meissner. I'm CEO of Unitil. I don't know if I'm bragging or telling you how old I am, but I've actually worked in utilities here in New Hampshire now for 40 years. I grew up in Merrimack, New Hampshire, went away to college to become a power engineer, co-opted with Eversource, now PSNH, now Eversource. Joined Eversource, what was at the time Public Service New Hampshire, right out of college. And after 10 years or so, went over to Unitil, and I've actually been with Unitil for 30 years now. So very proud to lead Unitil as a company. Unitil, as I'm sure most people know, is a provider of electricity and natural gas here in New Hampshire. We're actually the only New Hampshire-based public company here in New Hampshire, actually incorporated here in New Hampshire. And I think we know our customers in New Hampshire very, very well. Having lived here my whole life, I'm a New Hampshire native. In terms of some of the opportunities and challenges, opportunities I think we've been talking about extensively all day, I'm sure, advancing the grid, incorporating clean energy, enhancing the capabilities of the grid, ultimately I hope benefiting affordability. But I do think one of the challenges that we're facing is in fact affordability and ultimately reliability. Although when I think of that, I tend to think of it more New England-wide, resource adequacy, navigating the transition to clean energy, and the volatility and sometimes cost impacts that go with that. So I'm happy to be here today and look forward to answering your questions and those of Sam.
So I have a set of questions that I'll throw out to each of you. I'll indicate who I'd like to start by answering it, but feel free, any of you, to weigh in at any point. But yeah, I'd like to actually start with Bob. So you mentioned trying to invest in a grid that was meant to be sort of hub and spoke, power flowing in one direction, to one that's taking injections from small resources all over the place. How do you manage that? How do you manage to maintain reliability and do that in a cost-effective way? How do you strike that balance?
Eversource is focused on a lot of technology, so real-time monitoring, understanding what's going on in the grid, in the system, and leveraging smart technology so that we can balance the load and understand the transitions that are taking place. We have some areas now through the distribution of rooftop solar that, frankly, we're not overloaded, that become overloaded on a hot summer day because of the reverse power flow that's taking place. So we're trying to balance that and then make investments in the infrastructure to handle that load. When you may have had to make it for capacity concerns and address those capacity concerns on an export perspective, we're now having to shore that up. And then through that also grid technology, we're trying to optimize what we can get out of the existing infrastructure. We understand, reliability, safety concerns, and affordability concerns, but we have to make investments to make sure that the system can manage the capacity and then optimize it as much as possible. VVO, DERMS, distribution energy management systems, to try and leverage the existing infrastructure, because we're not going to be able to rebuild it all right away, and optimize what we get out of it. It's a journey. As I said, it alluded to, it took us decades to build it. We're not going to turn this around in 10 years. We can't cost effectively do that, and we can't, frankly, the constituency can't support it. So we're trying to target those areas, and then we use the interconnection process to focus in the right areas and manage those demands on the system.
Can you say more about the DERMS program that you have and what that looks like?
So we invested in a distribution management system connected through supervisor data and acquisition and control, so we can monitor smart switches on the system, understand the loading capacity, the amperage, and the like, get that back to the control center. So the control center I'll call them the good old days, which is probably a few days ago, but anyway, the good old days, the control center was really monitoring calls, dispatching crews, operating switches, and sectionalizing outages and the like. The control center is really the grid operator for us now. It's almost like a mini ISO where we're trying to balance that flow on the system and monitor it. So that distribution management system gives us visibility and telemetry, and then we're trying to add more technology so that it's self-healing and can manage that load itself without having to take manual interventions, albeit remote and technology. There's still manual interventions.
Anyone else want to weigh in on that?
I think you're going to pose a similar question to me, so I'm not going to give it all in one question.
To that point, so a lot of these investments fall under the title of grid modernization. So Tom, do you want to talk about the grid modernization investments that you all have made at Unitil, and do those look similar to what we just heard from Bob over at Eversource?
Sure. I think there is a lot of similarity. You kind of summed it up to begin with, where the grid we've had, and really largely still have, was a 20th century grid with one-way power flow, spoke and wheel, whatever you want to call it. So, looking ahead to the 21st century, we've been focused for at least 15 years now on recognizing that distributed resources are going to become a bigger and bigger part of the grid. So we need a plan for two-way power flow. We've been implementing changes to the system to accommodate that, reverse power flow, energy storage, foundational systems to be able to manage that. You mentioned DERMS, another technology and some of the back office support to actually manage the grid. One of the first things we implemented, and it's actually been almost 20 years ago now, was AMI. That gets talked about a lot, advanced metering infrastructure. The first system we installed was actually the first of its kind in the nation to do a multi-utility AMI implementation, gas and electric. We are now actually replacing that system with the state-of-the-art, the next generation system. And with the new system, we'll have the state-of-the-art and grid edge technology, granular metering. We'll be able to offer new services to customers, and it will integrate with OMS and DERMS and other systems to provide that enhanced capability. So I think we're building sort of the foundational pieces of a modern grid. Been very active in the data platform in New Hampshire. That'll be another element of all this. And I think the goal ultimately is to provide customers with more service offerings, more dynamic offerings, and ones better suited to the uses of the grid today, whether that's electric vehicles or rooftop solar or all the types of technologies that didn't exist just a few decades ago.
I'm curious, when you go through that rundown, how far out into the future are we looking before consumers will be able to start to take advantage of those types of programs as you're making these foundational investments?
Well, some of it I think is available now. It's interesting, as I was coming in, a gentleman was leaving, I won't tell you who it was, and happens to be one of our customers, and he was raving about the whole house time of use rate he's on now. So I know affordability is another theme. He was talking about how much money he saved with his type of usage in the home just switching to a whole house time of use rate. We also have an electric vehicle charging rate. So I think these are the types of things that we want to be able to offer that ultimately will help with customer affordability, but they will also encourage customers to charge their electric vehicle or adapt their behaviors in ways that ultimately are going to benefit the grid as well.
For those who haven't seen Unitil's whole house time of use rate, it's a very attractive one, and I hope that one day I'll be able to get it as a net metered customer, which I think is on the horizon as well. But Alyssa, I'm curious to talk to you about energy efficiency and the role that obviously all of the utilities partner together in the creation of the 3-year energy efficiency plan and offer it through the shared banner of New Hampshire Saves. How important is that in terms of getting to reach our energy goals?
I think it's very valuable to helping the state reach our energy goals and also helping my members, their customers, reach their goals as well. I think it helps to have shared programs because at the end of the day, if I'm facing an issue, I can pick up the phone and I can call Tom and say, hey Tom, what are you doing with this? How does this work? He mentioned upgrading meters. We're also starting to explore that and exploring how do we tie that to help our members achieve their goals. So when they were visiting you, they popped over to visit us. And so, being able to do those kind of reference checks and having those conversations, or, sitting down with Bob from Eversource and talking about how, I may cross through his lines to get to ultimately my member, because my utility is not contiguous. So how do we work together to best serve the needs? And I think that works with reliability. I think it works with energy efficiency. It works in terms of planning. I think it's just cooperation among our utilities in the state. And I think New Hampshire Saves is such a great example of that for us.
And so we're now on the second iteration of a 3-year plan that has, the past 2 3-year plans have looked very similar. The big change from the last one to the new one has been the incorporation of ADR, automated demand response. Hopefully I got that right as to what ADR stands for. Do you think that there are any programs that are underutilized in the New Hampshire, in our energy efficiency tool belt?
Well, I think there are some plans and some programs that we could look at for the future. One of the things we were talking about earlier this week was, incentivizing electric use for leaf blowers, for lawn mowers. One of the things that I was looking through as I was kind of poking through this again to refresh my memory is we seem to have great residential programs, we have great business programs, but I didn't see a lot of focus on multi-family dwelling units, and I live in the community of Plymouth, New Hampshire. Plymouth, New Hampshire is a college town. PSU is there, and so we have a lot of big, old Plymouth homes that are broken up into apartments for college kiddos, and so those homes are definitely needing some upgrades to make them efficient and useful. And let's be honest, this generation that's coming up, and my kids and that age group, they love technology. So how do we reach them? How do we convince them that energy efficiency is exciting and fun, and it's technology based, and it's beneficial? It's beneficial to them, it's beneficial to New Hampshire, it's beneficial to the planet. So how do you get them involved? And then I would say if I were queen for the day, which is what I've been saying a lot lately, I would say education, education, education. Because I don't think we can debunk energy efficiency myths enough, or educate our members enough on what they should be doing and what makes sense and what provides them with the biggest amount of benefits when you're looking at these programs.
Well, I'd love to hear about more electric leaf blowers. During COVID, working from home, listening to leaf blowers was like the bane of my existence. So we could push that one forward. I'd be psyched. Vince, can we talk about electrification of transportation? This seems like a huge opportunity for the entire electric utility industry, but obviously those are big loads. And so how do we make sure that those loads are playing well with the grid, and how do we capitalize on the benefit of potentially bringing all that demand into the electric system without increasing costs?
Yeah, it's a tremendous load, but it's also a tremendous impact to the environment currently. The transportation sector is probably one of the largest in New Hampshire when it comes to the greenhouse gas impact. And having lived in the Midwest and the West Coast, I can say you could just see the number of uptake or adoption of EV vehicles is we're really lagging behind in the state. And some of that is because the other states gave rebates to push it along. And so, in my opinion, you see it, the question becomes of how fast of a follower to push along. What is that velocity? And I have a hard time believing that electric vehicles are going away at this point. I think you could see more of a shift to a hybrid vehicles, which will still require some plug-in. And then I start thinking about the infrastructure around it. And that infrastructure requires a pretty sizable investment. But not only investment in dollars, but it's very time consuming. It's a long lead time to make these infrastructure investments. And I look across to the utility I have in Georgia and in New York, where we're doing some advanced metering investments right now, and they are multi-year investments. And I bring up advanced metering because I believe that is a key unlock. So at our Granite State Electric utility, we don't have AMI system currently today. And that key unlock is critical because it really lowers that time of, really takes advantage of the time of use to lower that rate that could charge a vehicle. Now, at Granite State Electric, we did apply through the DOE IIJA. We made an attempt to get some public funding, some government funding to reduce the cost of our AMI investment. Unfortunately, that was kind of turned down, so it's not going to come through. I don't believe that it's it's going to stop. I think the need is going to be there on that investment. And I still think it's a key unlock is that AMI. Now, that's probably the question of, how fast to follow. If I were to look at the question of how involved should utilities be in the maybe behind the meter, now I think that's a conversation more about public charging stations, and that's more of a policy decision is what I would say. But if we're going down this path where we know that the electric vehicles are going to be around, and if the market itself is not providing some of those public charging stations, at some point I think the decision could be made where we would prime the pump, and there you can leverage the utilities to set up some public charging stations perhaps. It's something we're willing to do. Liberty does in multiple states right now with our other utilities. We did make an investment down in Salem, New Hampshire, and in that we made an investment in some public charging stations, and currently we're in a rate case settlement, so I won't get into the details, but I do feel like as part of that settlement, we'll get some clear direction, whether that's to be an operator or whether that's just a support role. Whatever that turns out to be, we're very happy to play that role and very happy to support it.
So last time we did this, I was told, hey, don't forget about the fact that there are gas utilities up here too. So in a nod to that, I'd like to talk about the decarbonization of heat a bit, and I'll ask both Vince and Tom to weigh in on this. How do we start to move the needle on reducing the emissions from the gas system? And Tom, I've heard you talk about this quite a bit, that you see a clear path towards substantial reductions. And I'd love to hear about how you see that path laid out in a state like New Hampshire.
Before I even get to natural gas, one thing I'd say is, I think first you got to start with delivered fuels, because here in New Hampshire, almost 60% of the homes are oil and propane. And there's a reason for that, because we're a rural state. Extending expensive infrastructure to rural areas just isn't economic. So, from my standpoint, I guess one of the primary questions is, what's the long-term plan for delivered fuels? Because that's got to be a big part of this. Natural gas is only about 21% of the homes in New Hampshire. When you look specifically at natural gas consumption by residential customers, we're 3% of the state's carbon emissions. So 3% versus 97%. I think fundamentally we need to focus on the 97%. And what you just talked about, electric vehicles, that's half of it right there, electric vehicles. That's the big opportunity. In terms of what we are doing though, we do see a path forward. I don't think it's 100%, but it starts, I think, with hybrid heating systems anyway. So I'm sure everybody here is familiar with hybrid heating systems, in legacy homes that don't have a tight building envelope, to accommodate an air source heat pump. I think it makes a lot of sense to pair an electric heat pump with a traditional system, relying only on the traditional system during the coldest periods of the year, the rest of the time getting the benefit of the efficiency of an electric heat pump. That makes sense for customers. I think it improves affordability, and it's obviously cleaner. So I think that's a big part of it. We're also looking at decarbonizing the gas itself, whether that's through RNG, and long term it may include opportunities like hydrogen. But we are looking at RNG right now and other opportunities just to decarbonize the gas itself. The last thing I'll just leave you with is, I think a lot of people see electrification as a threat to the gas utilities, right? Like residential heat pumps threaten the business model of not the electric utilities, the gas utilities. Just to give you an indication for us, over 80% of our gas customers here in New Hampshire are residential customers. And those customers account for roughly 20 or 21% of our volume. So almost 80% of our volumes are commercial industrial, not residential. So you could look at us as really a provider of natural gas to hospitals, office buildings, large industrial customers, restaurants. The residential segment of that is fairly small. So I don't lose a lot of sleep at night worrying about how electric heat pumps are going to do away with our natural gas business. Instead, I think about how we can align our natural gas business to accomplish the objectives that we're trying to achieve.
Vince, you have anything? Vince, you have anything you want to add to that?
I'd say pretty aligned with Tom. Maybe I would add a little bit more of a perspective on just the complexity that I see here in this region. You know, when I look at my experience in, you know, say the Midwest and the West Coast, things were a lot simpler. You didn't have as much propane, you didn't have oil. It is very much every customer heats with natural gas. That greatly simplifies the transition. You also had fewer number of utilities, and those utilities that you do have in those regions of the countries, their footprints very much overlap, which greatly simplifies that transition itself. And so when I look across the complexity of how to make this happen, it's extremely complicated in this part of the country. If you were to say, boy, assume technology is neutral, which we know it's not going to be. Tommy gave some great examples on how the gas system is greening, and we know there'll be improvements on the electric side. But even if I had unlimited funds right now, I think it would take me decades to decommission the gas system and build up an electric system that could take on that load. And then when you add in the costs that would bring on, I think that would extend it even longer. The true challenge is on that really cold New England day. In New Hampshire day, you're looking, how do you heat a home is really the question. And so I think there's going to be quite a period of time where I agree with your solution, Tom. You're probably looking at some kind of hybrid heating. And I think where you could start, and where I would start as a background is design engineering, is where you'd probably start is exactly that. If you were to get the propane and the oil onto some kind of hybrid heating, this allows you a little more control. That gets some of the earlier carbon out of the system. But that allows you then to start maybe heating electric on the shoulder months, where someday then you could gradually build that system in conjunction where it could eventually take over. But that's quite a long time to maintain our gas system safely. So we still need to be investing in the gas to ensure that they're reliable and safe.
Bob, you mentioned 300-year storm events in 3 years. Can we talk about grid resilience and how we try to ensure reliability when we have these sorts of growing threats coming from the weather?
Yeah, certainly. Eversource is making significant investments, both the transmission and distribution systems. Those are a challenge. The commodity costs, poles, wires have risen dramatically. But we're making those investments and looking at, critical line links to shore those up, to make sure that we can provide safe and reliable and affordable power. That resiliency is not just poles and wires, it also is a heavy investment in trees, tree management, veg management. We have a 5-year cycle and 15,000 miles that we're trimming. It's a significant investment, and we see it today. The environment keeps throwing challenges at us, I guess I'll call it, where we used to worry about thunderstorms and snowstorms and ice storms. And my parents live in Asheville. I was just down in Asheville, and you want to talk about the power of water. You can see the power of water. We saw it up in the North Country here this summer with the implications of some of the heavy rains that we had. So we're making that investment in the infrastructure, but we're also making that investment to make sure that we have resiliency. We've put a lot of, as I said, distribution automation on the system, and we've actually achieved 53% of our customers can be restored in under 5 minutes from outages through sectionalization, through the remote analysis of what's going on in the system, isolating devices, and minimizing those customer outages. So we're trying to make sure that we can harden the system, have a resilient system, but have a reliable system and minimize the impacts to customers. You think about the electrification of transportation and home heating. I've done restorations in the Canadian ice storm in 1998. They went back to the Stone Age. There was no ATMs. There was no nothing. How are people going to operate? And people need to think about that themselves and be prepared to the point of, dual fuel, other capacity ways to heat their homes and provide for the services. So it's a significant challenge for us. We're making significant investments, and we're targeting those investments in areas of greatest concern, like the Coas County Loop, and making sure we have an adequate transmission supply to the Coas County Loop. So robust investment, investment in veg management as well as infrastructure.
Alyssa, I wonder if I could throw that question to you as well. I mean, your service territory is extensive, and you've got fewer customers to spread those costs out to. How do you all manage it?
I would say, Sam, it's a challenge every day that we talk about. We talk about storms. I think, like I said, I've been in New Hampshire 2 years, and we've had 6 FEMA events. I don't think the cooperative has ever had 6 FEMA events in 2 years. I am a little bit starting to wonder if I am a bad luck coin that has shown up in New Hampshire and brought you some really challenging, repetitive weather. But I can tell you we're doing some of the same things, right? We're looking at where we're seeing repeated outages at, where can we move some lines out of, out of the right-of-way and onto the roadway. Does it make sense when we're moving that line? If it's a section of line that serves a large number of members, is it something we should be looking at doing some underground investment? NHEC has been exploring FEMA mitigation funds, so not just the funds that you get to help you with the costs of restoration, but once you finish with a FEMA event, there are mitigation funds. So if you have an area that's been hard hit repeatedly, you can seek funding to help with some reinvestment there. We had planned on moving some lines, and we just decided to bury it. And burying electric lines in New Hampshire is not easy, nor is it cheap. I would say veg management is also huge for us. What we're finding is, we're working towards getting, to a better veg management cycle. Those costs continue to go up, so you try to make those dollars go a little bit further. But what we're finding with a lot of our outages is they're occurring from trees outside of the right-of-way. It's not the trees inside of my right-of-way, so in the 15-foot on each side of my line. It's that tree that's in the 16th foot, the 17th foot, the 18th foot, because we've got a lot of really tall trees in New Hampshire. And with the heavy amount of snow that is coming down and the lack of the hard freeze, that snow is filled with condensation. It's like concrete. And that's where things get really dicey for us, especially in the more remote areas where we have more, radial lines. Not easily fed from other directions or backed up. So we continue to look at investments, and we start with the beginning of where do we make investments that impact the most members, and we work out from there. Some of it is SCADA devices, some of it's looking at new AMI systems, some of it is upgrading some of our aging substations, some of it is targeted vegetation management. But I was nodding along as Bob was talking about this, because this is an issue that we face in our entire territory. When I look around this panel, I think, boy, I would really like some of your territory.
Yeah. On the question of storms and resiliency, I'd love to hear about battery storage and how you all see battery storage. This is one I'd love to hear actually from everybody if folks want to respond to it. I'd like to start with Vince, since Liberty has a battery pilot that's perhaps the most mature in the state of New Hampshire. The reason I get excited about this question is, I don't know if you all have been following the price of a lithium-ion battery, but it has absolutely cratered over the course of the past year for all sorts of reasons. And now we're seeing products like Impulse Labs induction range that's got a giant battery in the bottom of it. Like, we're sticking batteries in all sorts of things these days. And so I really think that storage has the potential to revolutionize the architecture of the grid, but curious if you all agree.
Yeah, I'll start it off. So we are seeing manufacturing prices coming down dramatically. Now, on the residential side, however, we're seeing a lot of demand to go up. And so that might be really tamping down some of those prices that are happening at the individual residential level on some of those batteries. But when you talk about the in front of the meter, of course, we're seeing those prices come down dramatically. And in fact, we've started to incorporate that in some of our planning we're doing today. So a few years ago, we looked at a project out west near Bellow Falls, and a project that was a one-way radial feed in a heavily wooded area. And of course, very susceptible to trees falling, and we were looking at pricing out the traditional approach, pipes, wires, another substation to give it that backup. And at that time, that was the more cost-effective solution. Today, when we look at the prices of battery with maybe a solar component to it, a lifetime of 8 hours in the event that line were to go down, it actually is more affordable. And so those are some of the solutions that we've incorporated into the planning. You referenced our pilot. So a few years ago, we had a pilot with 100 customers where the utility paid for and puts in a couple of batteries behind the meter. Now, I think there's great upside to putting it behind the meter, and the fact that, of course, those customers they're enjoying the fact of the peak shaving. So where they're charging up the battery at the lower cost, and they're kind of shaving down some of the more costly usage. They also get the redundancy in the event of a storm. They can carry their own load. But in that pilot, in the event of a heavy heating incident, the utility has the ability to press a button and we could pull 80% out and drain it to the grid, which then brings down the overall transmission demand, lowering everybody's cost to achieve. And so we did have a third party come in. They took a look at that pilot, and currently it is coming out cost effective, but at this point it's minimal. Now I think as prices start coming down, maybe manufacturing goes up because the cost of manufacture is down. I think this is going to be a long-term solution that's going to be there. For the Granite State Electric, though, we still need that big investment. We still need the AMI to make that happen. We still need the DERM solution that Bob was talking about to make it happen. And again, these are some long lead times. So if it sounds like a pitch for some of this infrastructure, that's really what we need to enable some of that great technology that is coming down in price.
Anybody else want to weigh in on storage?
We at Eversource, we implemented a 25 megawatt battery in Provincetown. You may have heard of this. We installed the battery system. Provincetown is fed by one line that comes out the Outer Cape, and when that line goes down, Provincetown is flat until we could fix it. We were going to build a companion line. We did an analysis of this battery system. We installed the battery system and rehabbed the line, but didn't build the companion line. Cost-effective solution. And Provincetown has ridden through about four outage events since the battery's been in service, where the city's run on the battery for 4 or 5 hours. We've been able to restore this regular feed, and it's worked phenomenally. My point in sharing that is similar to Vince's comment. It's the right location, right place, right time, right investment. Very dense area, obviously doesn't get any more remote than the end of the Cape Cod. So we endorse the storage technologies. We need to look for the right locations and how do you integrate it to the system. From behind the meter perspective, we don't have the AMI technology either. We're looking at that. Back when AMI came in, we went to the AMR technology, and now we need to go forward with the AMI in the future. But you mentioned pulling the 80%. We've met customers that said, no, that's my battery. You're not taking my battery. If the lights go out, I want it. So there's still some social economic challenges that we're going to have to face with how can we pull that out and be able to maximize it and optimize it for peak shaving and those opportunities.
I can just mention. So we also have a energy storage project down in Townsend, Massachusetts, but we're not really using it for the reliability aspect per se. What we're using it for is really balancing the distribution system because we have enormous amounts of distributed energy, in particular solar. So in locations where we have more solar than the system can really accommodate, having that energy storage is a key way to just balance the system, store the energy, and then re-inject it later when it's needed. So we're using it for that purpose. I do agree with the premise that long term, I think especially behind the meter storage will be an important part of providing reliable service to customers. We haven't gone in that direction yet, in part because I think one of the things we haven't talked about is I agree with the premise that weather is getting more severe, more frequent. We're seeing a lot of damage, and the cost of those storms is increasing dramatically. So a battery may help keep the lights on in a customer's home for some period of time, but the damage to the infrastructure still happens. And so we're really focused on mitigating the damage to the infrastructure because it's costly, it takes time, and it's getting very repetitive for the utilities to keep facing this over and over again. And I think everybody up here would agree that the problem is trees. So there's only a couple of solutions. Remove the trees or remove the electric lines. And the only option for removing the electric lines is to go underground, and that's very, very costly.
I'd like to take my prerogative to push you all a little bit. The examples you all gave were all utility-owned storage. And I think this is a key tension that we've heard this morning is between customers being able to invest in their own infrastructure and then receive a price signal and decide what they want to do with that versus the utilities owning or putting forth a program that they own. Where does that tension come from? I mean, do folks have an opinion on whether or not it might be a more economically efficient way to do this, to just pass along a price signal and let customers decide what to do with it?
So, Sam, I'll touch that a little bit. I think price signals are great. Price signals tell everyone what they need to do, and then they can make choices from there, right? Price signals are great when it comes to time of use for anything from pool pumps to washing machines and dryers. When you talk about electric water heaters, price signals work for charging electric vehicles. The question is when you implement those, do people find those price signals to be punitive? Do they find them to be something that signals them away from the advancements that they want to make and we want them to make as their utility partner, right? So I think it's a matter of getting it right so those investments don't impact others, because we're all hypersensitive to the fact that every investment we make impacts all of our ratepayers. And that includes a wide range of socioeconomic families and seniors and such. So I think price signals are great. I think it's something we should definitely be looking at. If you look out west, where you've seen power prices, go from, you look at the ERCOT market, you look at the CAISO market, and you look at how volatile those markets have been. Price signals help tell us what to do to help save money. And there have been some great examples of utilities implementing, time of day use to all of their members. That's, one example. Other utilities have said, here's an electric vehicle rate. I mean, it's not a secret. If you set a price signal and you say peak is 26 cents a kilowatt, off peak is 6 cents a kilowatt, when are you going to charge your electric vehicle? I mean, that's a social experiment that's been played out time and time again. So to me, it's a lot about price signals, and it's making sure that we try to limit any subsidization between rate classes and between ratepayers as much as we can.
Okay, I'd like to talk about siting a bit. That has come up a few times throughout the course of the day. It's hard to build anything, anywhere. It's particularly hard to build things in New England. We did have reform of the Site Evaluation Committee this past year. There are, however, no active projects before the Site Evaluation Committee, the threshold there being 30 megawatts. I'm curious, do you think we've done enough? A lot of the resources that we're expecting to see come on the grid now are below that threshold, and if we're going to build, the siting authority is going to be the local community. So Bob, I'm curious if you have thoughts on that.
Eversource is very supportive of the siting changes that have taken place to try and streamline and reform the siting process. We are still concerned that as it currently is outlaid, there's still delays in costs that are generated. So, we continue to want to see and drive efficiency in that process and in the siting evaluation process, both from the regulatory standpoint and even the Department of Environmental Services across these projects. There's more to be done, I guess is the way I'd say it. Cautious optimism, very happy that we've got some positive direction, but there's more to be done.
Anyone else want to weigh in?
Add that I think whether it's New Hampshire, whether it's regional, whether it's national, permitting reform is a big issue. And I think the landscape is changing rapidly in this country in terms of the policies. We're talking about electrification, we're talking about clean energy, and I really just think we have to take a fresh look at what we've been doing for a long time, and instead of making incremental changes, I think we need to look at it from the standpoint of how do we accomplish the objectives that we really need to accomplish, even if that's a complete overhaul or a transformational change to our process.
So on that front, reforming the utility business model, I think, was something that was put front and center by our keynote this morning. I'm curious if you all would care to weigh in on that. I mean, what does the business model of the utility of the future look like? Is it just cost of service with other incentives layered on top, or is it something that's a total turnabout on as to how we do it now?
Well, for Eversource, as you know, we've introduced a performance-based rate making mechanism. We do think there's a fundamental shift from cost of service that could take some cost out of the rate-making process, streamline the process, have performance metrics that hold the utilities accountable for critical elements like reliability or interconnections or customer service, and move forward in that front, so that we could focus on these challenging issues that we just talked about versus, focusing on developing a rate case every 2 years on the cost of service model.
When I think about changing the utility business model, I mean, let's start with what we talked about earlier. We have a 20th century power system that was intended to deliver a very simple service, right? We delivered electricity to consumers. We measured that once a month and sent them a bill, and that worked for 100 years. The nature of our business is changing because now we don't just have consumers. We have consumers, we have producers who are injecting onto the grid, prosumers. We have people that want to use our product differently, electric vehicles, electrification. So the use of the grid is changing from the consumer perspective. So I think when we think about changing our business model, we have to have new tariffs, new service offerings that are tailored to the needs of the 21st century. In terms of what we do as a utility, we're still a grid operator. We're still an infrastructure company. But we want everybody to use our product, which is the grid. And so I think we need to develop and layer on more ways for customers to take our service in a way that's tailored to their needs. And to me, that's transforming the business model.
So I do want to leave time for audience Q&A. I do need someone to be our mic runner. Oh, okay, great. So take a moment to cogitate on questions that you would like to ask our panel. And then, I think I'll throw one last big old softball to each of you, or to all of you, which is, here we are, 2024. If we were to look out 10 years, 2034, how are your businesses going to look different? What are the big changes that you think customers would notice if they were to tune in 10 years from now? We'll just go right down the line.
I talked a little bit about the big infrastructure investments. I think from a Granite State Electric standpoint, ideally in 10 years we would have that AMI implementation that would then enable the customers to get the time of use, which would help push along the electric vehicles, which would go along very well. I think a step in that direction. I think some more investment in the DERMS. I think more investment around some resiliency and some more technology would put us in a much better spot. We've got a very good reliability record. We want to keep that up, but we want to be able to stay affordable while giving these other investments along as well.
Vince said it very well. I think that's exactly where we are. We absolutely need to meet the changing models that our customers are presenting to us to be able to time of use rates and the like. Continue the investment in infrastructure so there's resiliency and hardening in the system to withstand what's coming from a weather impact. And then, having this smart system to be able to leverage every electron we can out of it to service to our customers in a safe, reliable, and affordable manner.
Yeah, I think for NHEC, it's DERMS and data. It's, using AI to help us harness the data that we have, because I think we all have an incredible amount of data, and we can't always get to it how we want it, when we want it, where we want it, and then it's an overwhelming amount of data. And so I think you're going to continue to see investments in that area. It's one of the things that's part of our strategic plan over the next 5 years, that we're really looking at data integrity and how you use data and how you harness that data to make decisions. So I think that the technology is great, and we're again looking at updating our AMI meters as well, but I think it's the data that's going to be really driving the decisions that we make. And then on top of that, I wish I had a crystal ball to tell you what my members were going to want in 10 years, but I'm comfortable saying that what my members want that's what NHEC is going to be doing.
Hopefully we'll have a statewide utility data platform in the very near future.
Well, first of all, let me agree with everybody here. I think we're all doing many of the same things. We're going to continue to do those things, and we're going to continue to move forward with everything that everybody just talked about. You know, a few incremental things I can add. I hope our reliability continues to improve. I mean, that's going to be a key focus for us. Another thing, I hope to see higher system utilization in 10 years. You know, as we electrify, and especially as we electrify with electric vehicles, we want to make sure that we're adding that load to a system where we don't need a commensurate level of investment to meet the demand. So if we can charge at the right times and increase system utilization, then all customers should benefit from more affordable rates. So I think that will be one key thing. And then the other thing I would expect to see 10 years from now is, you know, really changing the way, you know, our customer-facing systems, what customers see from us as a utility, more information, education, ability to tailor service offerings, understand the offerings, pick the rate that's best for them. I think that would be something that would be very valuable over the next 10 years.
All right, folks. I believe we have a roving microphone. So if you have a question, and we have our first question right there.
Hi, Bob Benson. I have a question for Eversource, please. I think you mentioned upgrading the COAS loop, and I know you just added, replaced the poles. Are you going to add capacity there too on the COAS loop?
So the X178 that goes from central New Hampshire up to the Coos County Loop and then the loop itself, we are upgrading all those structures. And through that process, we're building to our new design. And building in that new design includes increased capacity in the conductor. The new conductor has incremental capacity, which will help with hosting capacity and the like. So the whole loop will be upgraded as well as the tie.
Great. So when is the loop going to be upgraded for capacity?
I'm sorry?
When is the loop going to have new capacity added? The actual loop?
The actual loop?
He thinks the timing of how it'll all.
Oh, the timing, the loop will be finished. The loop itself will be finished in about a year and a half, and X178 will be in siting now. Will take about 3 years, depending upon how we're allowed to rebuild that, whether it's a full line rebuild or whether we're doing it over a longer period of time.
But the loop, you're just putting new poles in. You're not putting new capacity.
No,
right?
we're putting new conductor in. We're reconductoring and new poles in the Coos County Loop.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
So just to tease that out, so those they're advanced conductors that are being put in, is my understanding. Can you just say a bit more about those?
So the existing conductors are 795. They're going up to 1272. Different technology. There's more carrying capacity in that cable than the old cable. That's our new design standard, so we're not necessarily upgrading or adding. We could go way bigger and bundled conductor. That's not what we're doing. It's a reliability upgrade based upon asset condition in that Coos County Loop. And therefore that standard adds a couple hundred more amps that we can carry over that line and add capacity.
Storage. Do you agree that storage is a key ingredient in the new energy transition? And if so, are you prepared to scale up big time? And if not, or what's standing in the way? What impediments are there, regulatory or financial?
Obviously, we're all interested in batteries here at the Local Energy Solutions Conference. He just said storage. That's true. A fair point. I've got a water tank in my basement, which is a big water battery.
And I think you might be talking to me. Are we having a moment where we're talking about pumped hydro? That's possible. No, it is something that I think we're going to see continued discussion on across the country. I think there are a number of things that have to happen in order for this energy transformation, right? We're going to need more data. We're going to need to be able to use that data. We're going to need a multitude of technologies when it comes to generation. We're going to need a multitude of technologies, I believe, when it comes to storage, whether it's battery, whether it's pumped hydro, whether it's other type of storage we haven't even begun to envision. I think you're going to need to see technology. I think you're going to need to see consumers play an active role. I think it's all part of our future. A lot of it depends on where you live, right? What is cost effective in terms of a resource, in terms of generation and storage? What kind of sun capacity do you have, right? What kind of wind capacity do you have? What do you have access to? Transmission, transmission, transmission. You can't love renewable energy if you don't love transmission. And everybody loves transmission until they want to build it next to your house. So I think all of these are keys to our energy future, and it's also recognizing, geographic diversity and having our systems interconnected and everything else. You don't want all of your renewable energy in one geographical location, right? Because I know it sounds trite. When the sun doesn't shine in one area, it might be shining somewhere else. And you want to have that capability to move those electrons freely. And you might find a state that has better wind, but maybe doesn't have great solar, or has great solar, but doesn't have great wind. So you want to be able to have those sharing capabilities as utilities. So I would just say, I think it's a multitude of factors. And I don't know that one technology, one generation, one storage, one anything is key, but I would say transmission, transmission, transmission.
My Energy Nerd podcasts have lately been all very excited about hot rocks in a box, which I mostly bring up just because I wanted to say those words in a sentence. So more questions?
Thank you. We often hear all of the above energy options, and that availability and affordability, reliability and affordability is important. But there's a missing third thing that's critical, and that's safety. You've alluded to the growing problems that you're seeing in the damages of the electrical network, but there's damages in more than just that. Life on Earth, the rising costs of FEMA, and biodiversity loss from climate change. We've known for decades this would come, so it's actually not a bad luck situation. It's more of we saw this 30 years ago, and we failed to have the right policies in place to avoid a problem caused by too much climate pollution, mainly from fossil fuels. So two questions, or question with two parts. Do you agree that the utility industry is responsible for helping our legislators guide policy to address that third critical component of delivering energy, so we get affordability, reliability, and safety? The second part is, have you ever heard of carbon fee and dividend? This is a cashback carbon fee on fossil fuel producers and imports, rising $10 per ton of CO2 a year, fully rebated back to households on a per capita basis each month. Households come out ahead financially, and we reduce emissions in the most cost-effective way. And would you like to endorse it? Because I volunteer trying to get Congress to do it, and what I hear from Congress is we need to hear from more groups and businesses that they want to see this. Thank you.
So it sounded like a two-part question. What is the utility industry's role in advocating for reducing emissions? And the second, thoughts about carbon fee and dividend. Anyone want to go?
Well, first I would make the point that I don't think any sector of our economy has made more progress on decarbonization than the electric industry. Most of the progress that we've made in this country has been through decarbonization of electricity. So, and I think every utility that I know believes strongly that we do have a role to play in it. We're all moving in that direction. We're all trying to find the right solution. I think education and working with policymakers is important. I can tell you internally, pretty much every strategy we have in some way touches decarbonization. Whether it's electric or gas, everything we're doing touches that. And as you alluded earlier, we do see a vision where we can make great progress. I think sometimes where there's disagreement is, well, how do you do that? It's about implementation, it's about options. And I think we need to remember that we're all pulling in the same direction, we're all trying to accomplish the same thing. Sometimes we have different ideas about the best way to do that.
Next up. Sure. So the follow-up question is, does anyone want to weigh in on the carbon fee and dividend?
It's not something I'm an expert on.
Right. So I think what we're hearing is that's a no comment. So go right ahead.
Okay. So Jennifer Smith, I'm a member of the Local Energy Committee, and I've been concerned for some time now that the interconnection queue problem is just enormous. And it struck me that trying to figure out where we grow the capacity to do more distributed energy at local level is one of the best solutions for the short term while the interconnection queue problem gets worked out. Now, Clean Energy New Hampshire has circuit rider programs up in the North Country and Monadnock region to help those local energy committees. But my local energy committee, it's like, you know, my pay grade is 0. And I don't think anybody else on the Energy Committee has the time and energy to put into understanding things that could help a lot. And I was really impressed this year to learn about the grid twin technology. But I don't really have the capacity to get into understanding how that will help us in our town decide where do we want to put in a community solar that we can get at least up to the 5 megawatt. Should that go down at the transfer station where we're going to have an electric trash truck? Is that the best place for it? Or should it go on our biggest draw, which is the safety center? How do we get that kind of help out to all of these energy committees to figure these things out so that we can fuel this revolution at that level while we wait to get the interconnection queue problem solved?
I think interconnection, we all knew it was going to come up. So go ahead.
And I'll talk about this from a pretty high level. So this was an issue that we were facing at NHEC. We were finding that members found some of our guidance confusing, that there were, perpetual truck rolls that increased costs for us. It increased cost and frustration to our members. So last year, NHEC went through a lean process on our interconnection rules, how we handle it as a staff. And they're all over their wave, everybody. Awesome. And so we went through this big journey, is what I would say, in process, and we came out with a number of improvements and changes that we were going to make as a utility to make this more friendly to our members, so it's easier for them to do. Because if it's easier for our members to do, the applications and the processes come in right, which makes it easier for us to administer for them. So we're at the point where about 42% done with the changes to the process that we're making. I'm really excited to say we've got a video coming out this week that's going to show our members what the do's and don'ts of this process is, because again, a lot of times if you throw a bunch of paperwork at someone, it's not easily understandable, or there may be misconceptions about what it is we're looking for. So we put together this great video. We thought this would be a great way to educate our members. So I think it's just a matter of us continuing to work with our customers and members to make sure that the process is understandable, it can be followed, it can be replicated, and then that also helps us get to that process faster and easier, because where we find most of the issues are just the mistakes, and what we've noticed is the same mistakes happen over and over and over. So I think it's cleaning up, having clear direction, clear rules, clear expectations, and then it allows us to service our members better.
I wonder, Bob, if I can ask you this question as well. So there's been enormous progress made on the smaller systems with the implementation of a new software platform at Eversource. There's still a very large backlog when it comes to these community scale projects, which have larger grid impacts and need to be studied. So maybe you could speak to what's going on there.
Thank you. We have made substantial progress on the smaller ones, been able to work through the backlog. Similarly, you know, we're looking at our internal processes on these study issues, and we're plagued with the same issue. You get some information, you don't get all the information, we're back and forth. It's a slow, arduous process. So we're trying to refine that and help the communities make the right choice. But it's a work in progress. There's been some progress made, but we have more work to do.
And I will say there has been a rulemaking kicked off on the interconnection question, so hopefully solutions on the horizon. All right, so I'm going to say one more question, and then we should all give ourselves a break on this Friday afternoon. For those who don't know, there will be a sort of cocktail hour at the Penstock, which is just down the hall. So just be aware that that's what's up next. Go ahead.
Thank you. With the expectation that we're going to need more transformers and possibly even higher voltage transformers, what type of investment and research is going into hardening those transformers against a Carrington type event caused by a geomagnetic storm or solar flare activity? Just this past June, the Seabrook Station nuclear power plant had to power down its reactor because of fluctuations to protect their transformer. And so I think it's very much on the Seacoast, New Hampshire people's minds how we can protect new and existing infrastructure against something like that.
If anyone doesn't know what a Carrington event is, I encourage you to Google it so that you can have something else that you can stress about that's completely out of your control. Does anyone have thoughts about transformers and how we harden them?
Well, as an industry, we're working with the manufacturers, identifying these kind of concerns. I'll be candid with you to say that the focus has really been on the supply chain challenges after COVID. Not that the electrogeomatic, I can't say it, Carrington events aren't a concern, but we've really been focusing on developing supply chain. So we've done strategic sourcing, we've been able to resolve that. We've actually down to the last set of transformers that we monitor on a daily basis to make sure they're coming. But as an industry, EEI, EPRI, and is working hard on to say, is there technology we need to embed into the newer transformers to address this concern? It's another thing that keeps me up at night. I didn't choose this haircut.
When I was a journalist, we did a story about this, and my takeaway was that a strategic national stockpile of a relatively small number of transformers might be the solution to worrying about a Carrington event. Just throwing it out there. Don't know if anyone else has a thought about that.
EEI is working on that. They have a strategic stockpile of transformers.
Okay, folks. Thank you all so much. I'd like you to join me in a round of applause for our panel. Thank them all for being here.